Welcome and thank you for watching another video of mine. This video is going to be titled Living with the Physical Emotional Pain. This video really hits home. I am retired military. I have a lot of health issues due to being on deployment in the military, coming back from overseas, getting ill. It hits home with me because I have a lot of fellow soldiers who have been sick physically, like myself, through cancer. I've survived my cancer. I have a lot of friends that haven't survived the cancer they have. I have degenerative disc disease, have some other health issues because of that. I'm on disability. So physical pain is chronic. I have chronic pain, so I deal with every day. The emotional pain, 22 veterans a day commit suicide. And people don't understand that a lot of times being in the military, you're a very physical person. I spent over 20 years in the military. I was prior service Air Force 8 years before I went Army National Guard and was infantry for over 13 years there. So I have altogether over 20 years in the military. And so to be a physical person and then turn around and all of a sudden you cannot be physical, it's such an emotional state. You know, I've dealt with depression. A lot of my people I know have dealt with depression. I have PTSD. Nobody goes overseas without PTSD. The best way to explain it, over 20 years ago, I was in Arkansas. I crossed the railroad tracks in Jacksonville, Arkansas, and the light signal wasn't working right. So the arms came down, but that area I've been through before was known to do that. And so the arms came down, then went back up, and I was like, there's no train coming because there's a stretch of track there, and it's right in town. The train's supposed to go slow through town anyways, but there is a curve about a block away on the right side, block and a half away. And sure enough, I started to drive through there, and then the arms came down. Didn't think nothing because it was coming down anyways as I was driving through, so I just turned, and I turned right into a train. It was a double track. Train was speeding, supposed to be like 15, 20 miles per hour through there. I talked to the conductor and the officer, and police showed up, police officer, and the train was traveling 6 miles per hour. Drug my car. It's a pure miracle that I survived. Because where I sat was the only place that was left in my car. It looked like someone put a hand on either side and just squashed the car in. And I got out of the car. I was able to get out of the car without scratching. I didn't find out till years later. My back trouble, I believe part of that was my spine got twisted, caused issues in my back. At that time, I was young and I was happy to be alive. So when the police showed up and the rescue team and all that, I signed paperwork. I didn't go to the hospital. I was young and foolish. I should have went to the hospital and have a complete check on my body, and I didn't. I just happened to be alive. But my point is, that's a prime example of PTSD. For the rest of my life, sometimes when I go across or I'm in a town and I hear a train horn go off, or if I get near a track and the arms come down, a lot of times not all the time, but sometimes it just, for some reason, just clicks in that memory, and I'll be in a cold sweat or be a little nervous near until I get across the track. That's a prime example of PTSD. Nobody in the military goes on deployment without PTSD. Whatever level it is to that person's what they've experienced and witnessed, but well, I shouldn't say deployment. I mean deployment in a combat zone. But any veteran is a combat veteran like myself. You have a form of PTSD, and hopefully, you've been in a combat situation. It does not hurt to go to talk to somebody. That's one thing about the VA I agree with. The VA does have good counseling, and I appreciate my counselor that I talked to in the VA. I don't agree with some of the health issues with the VA. I've been fighting the VA because, well, as for cancer, they won't admit the cancer's from being in Iraq, and they won't admit my back trouble. I have no documentation. I told him that's because I was old infantry, old school, suck it up, better cut, and move. So he didn't go complaining when you're aching, pains, and hurts. Well, now, all these years later, I'm having all kinds of physical problems, and they're like, well, there's no documentation. Obviously, there's no documentation. I didn't whine and cry. You deal with it. That's the mentality they give you. But when you try to ask for help, they stand against you. I like the current president we have. Everybody knows me, knows I voted for Trump, and I'm going to vote again for him in 2020. I think he was sent by God, and I'll explain about that later in the video later on because of the turmoils of our country, the sins of a nation. I just did a video on abortion, and the biggest number one cause of death in our country is abortion. So there's a lot there I've talked about. But living with the physical and emotional pain as a veteran, the VA is being revamped by the President of the United States. That's what I like about him. He's big on military people and veterans, but it takes time. There's a lot of things he's passed, but with laws and stuff at the VA, but it may take 2 or 3 years down the road before things are implemented. It takes time. And personally, I don't think I'm going to see anything out for myself. That's all right. I can deal with it. But the emotional and the physical, and you get a depression that gets on you. I've dealt with it myself. And you start thinking things. I've had friends that have committed suicide. I had one friend that was a situation where he hit someone and it killed them, and I think he killed himself because it was like a murder-suicide, but the situation, he lost his temper, lost his anger. I deal with anger all the time. I constantly pray to God and deal with anger. Outside of God, punching bag. I'm not that physical fit, but I still could punch on that bag. I've spent a lot of years in martial arts training, and my favorite's boxing, Western boxing. So, I can't go out there and do no 45-minute workout, but I still go out there for 2 minutes. That's all it takes. That's all I got in me anymore. But sometimes you just got to let that energy go. You get so much build up in you. I find my best is prayer. The reason I'm doing these videos is dealing with things, and it's easier to speak out to somebody. I have trouble in crowds. A veteran, like I knew one veteran, Vietnam veteran, I was told by a counselor, went to his son's ball games. Never saw him play once, because every time he went to watch the ball game and his son play, he'd go up on top of the bleachers, and he constantly, with all the crowd, he would be watching the door, see who was coming in and out, because he did security in Vietnam. And it was just ingrained in you, trained to do that. So he could never enjoy his son playing ball. He went in the war zone. It doesn't leave you. It's the emotional attachment. And it's something that stays with you all your life. So this topic, living with physical and emotional pain, is something that's very close to me, and I thought it'd be a good subject to talk about. And not that, just people dealing, not have to be anybody in the military, but anybody dealing with anything in life. Life's tough. Life is nothing but a challenge. It's not a cakewalk. We deal with a lot of things, physically, emotionally. You might have a sickness. You might have grieving over somebody. You'd be hurt by somebody. There's people, you don't go through life without getting hurt by somebody emotionally. I mean, that's given. So what I do is everything, I always turn to God, and I go for guidance to God, and I look to His Word. So I was looking in the book of Psalms, in 18th chapter, 2nd verse, and Psalms 34th chapter, 19th verse, and talks about Psalm of Lord is my rock, Lord delivereth from many afflictions. So if you're having physical pain, you can go to God for guidance. There's no guarantee. I know there's a lot of people preach and teach healing. I believe in healing. I believe many things in my life. My cancer, I was stage 4 rectal cancer. When they found out I had my cancer, my odds of me living were not good, and I lived through it. I accepted everything. I was ready. I have a strong faith in God. I was ready if it was my time to go to God. I was ready to see my Father and be with my Father, even though I love my family. I just had a granddaughter born 2 weeks ago, and a grandson born almost 2 years ago. So that was right before I had my cancer. Matter of fact, the first time I met my son's girlfriend, I said, "Y'all get together and make me some grandkids." And guess what? They did. So I got a grandson with them. They got a grandson and now a granddaughter. And so yeah, she laughs. Macy, I talked to Macy, and she's like, "Well, the first time we met, he was like, 'Give me grandkids.'" I was like, "Well, thank you." But they make life worth living. But even though I love my grandkids so much, nothing keeps me from wanting to be with God. Of course, I want my grandkids with me, with God, my family. There's people in my family that don't believe, and some people in my family make fun of me and mock me on things I look at, and that hurts emotionally. It does, because I know what the outcome is. They don't see the outcome, and that's the problem. They don't see where they're going, and I want them to be with me in heaven. I love them so much. But no matter how much I love my family, I love God, and I want to be with God. And so when I found out about my cancer, it wasn't doom and gloom. I was like, either I was going to spend more time with my family, or I was going to be with God. But we deal with physical pain, and it's chronic pain. I got it for the rest of my life. I got the chronic pain, and I take medication for it, and then that causes problems. I have a permanent colostomy bag, so a lot of times medications interfere digestive and causes a lot of problems that way. But I look in the book of Matthew, 7th chapter, verses 7 through 8, and it talks about asking God for help or for healing, seeking God out, and knocking, and He'll answer the door. Go to God for everything. Book of Acts, 5th chapter, verse 16, talks about Jesus healing the multitudes. And if you have pain, you go to God. We look at the whole book of Job, where Satan was in heaven and wanted to test, and God gave him permission to test Job. Job suffered more than anybody humanly possible. And in the end, because he persevered and kept his faith to God, even though he was weak at moments, he was flesh, he was weak and going through everything physically against him, even boils, you name it, emotionally. He just lost his wife, his children, his grandchildren. He lost everything. So he had a spiritual attack that affected physical and emotional on Job. And Job stayed steadfast. In the end, God blessed him, gave him more than he had. It didn't say tenfold back, it was 14-fold back. He gave more wealth, more possessions, but he was able to have another family. And he was blessed in that way because he stood by God. When you read in the books of Romans, 8th chapter, verse 18, it says, "Sufferings of today are not worthy compared to our future glory." We suffer here on earth, but eventually, if you have faith in God, you'll be in heaven, and it'll be trivial. Everything here is temporary. You look at a man that lives a generation, if he lives a long life, if he doesn't pass at a young age, you're looking at 70 or 80 years. It ain't nothing. I'm almost 54. I'm almost 54. I have issues with memory because some of my medications. So my short-term memories mess up. I am 54. I was thinking of 55. 55 is, my wife was teasing me every day about going to Denny's and getting something to eat. So you'll be doing the senior citizen discount next year. I was like, bless you. So, but I'm 54 years old, and I just blink my eyes, and I can't believe, looking in the camera, I can see I look old, but I cannot believe how quick it went. When you're young, you're living life, you don't think about it, and it creeps on you quick. And so life is short. It really is. And no matter how much pain you deal with, it's temporary. Romans chapter 8, 28 verse says, all things work together for God to them that love God, to them who are called according to their purpose. There was a man I know, his name is Mac Wilson, and I have a lot of respect for Mac. He had a disease that put him in a wheelchair, but his body, it just affected his body. He was married when they found out he had his disease, had 2 or 3 kids, and Mac made a decision, divorce his wife, let her live a life with someone else. And I don't agree with that because we were to marry, and just marriage is very is a covenant. You make a marriage, and you cannot, just because of health reasons or whatever, separate. I've been married. My wife and I were divorced, then remarried again. 13 years later, we were able to have forgiveness, work through our problems. So I'm very strong about that. But that was their decision. I'm not here to judge them. It's something I would disagree with. Don't mean, Mac was such a good man. He would I would go over to church and help serve communion at the Christian church I grew up. So we went to Mac, give him communion sometimes on Sunday afternoons. He was in a wheelchair and he couldn't move much. He had a nurse there 24/7 taking care of him. And he could move his mouth and hands just a little bit. And a lot of times we go in there and it's supposed to be just a few minutes, but I'd spend a long time with him every time I go talk to him. He did everything on cassettes, and it was just incredible. He had people, he made videos, not videos because this is back in the 70s, middle 70s, early 80s, but he had cassette tapes, and he would preach on cassette tapes, and the knowledge he had, and I thought it was awesome. We would go in there, and he had all these cassette tapes. It was a whole room full, and a lot of the churches, people were in the churches would come and get his tapes. A lot of times he'd give tapes out of his preaching. He was just a wonderful man, a godly man, and so much respect for him. Never complained about a situation, never. My grandfather was in an accident when I was young. My father's father. He spent over 20 years in a wheelchair, like the last 26 years of his life. He was in solid pain. The room that he lived in, it was an old house. He built it. It was a log cabin. That was the main bedroom, and then he built this 2-story house around it. I remember tearing out the walls years ago when they were fixing to tear the building down long after he was gone. A friend of ours had bought it, and he was putting a field out there, cornfield, and them logs were still like they were done the day before, even though they were old, like 100-year-old log cabin he built around it. Just, I think it was poplar wood, but just awesome to tear the walls out, see the way the walls were, how preserved the wood was. But it was a 2-story house. He'd step out of his bedroom, and the kitchen and the outside porch was on one level, and then the bottom level was back porch, the bathroom, and the kitchen. Because it was the living room, the porch, and on the same level as the bedroom, and then the kitchen, like I said, the kitchen and the bathroom, the back porch were on a different level. So he had to step down. He used crutches up on that level, and then he'd step down into his wheelchair, and then use his wheelchair on the bottom level. And then he had a wheelchair. Since it was an old house, it was narrow doors, he kept a wheelchair out on the porch. So he'd use his crutches, go out on the front porch and sit. let me go out there and grandma would make the sweetest tea, sweet tea, sweet tea, and I had my air rifle and I pump it up. A lot of times in the bean field and stuff, there'd be a groundhog up there, so I'd sight in on it. He always got tickled. We'd be drinking tea, he'd chew his tobacco and sit by each other, and I'd shoot that groundhog in the butt and like see it spin around, take off running. He thought that was the neatest thing. But I had a lot of respect for him because he was in pain. And he would move around and he would cuss so much. He was in so much pain. But once he gets situated on his crutches and sit down, he was always apologizing. Always apologizing. He was ashamed of the way. The man was in severe pain. And back then he didn't go to the doctor. I mean, I was 3 years old, 4 years old before my grandparents got plumbing in the house. They had an outhouse. Well, maybe I was 2 or 3 years old around there because I know it's over in a year. It's like 2 or 3 years old when they got the bathroom they put in the back part of the house. Other than that, they went outside and used the outhouse, which is down out the back door a little bit down the hill. And I was around that time, 2 or 3 years old, about the same times when he started, because he had been hurt his back. He was using a cane and with the crutches. About the time, I think that was 3, when he started kind of half using a wheelchair. And within that year, he was permanently in the wheelchair. And he, like I said, I just have so much respect for him. I can't put it in words. I mean, there was times, a good thing I started driving in high school because it was 3 miles away was my high school. And they liked it where I got to driving because they could call me in if Dad was in town and they say, hey, your grandfather fell. I was allowed to leave the high school, go home and pick him up if I had to and put him in his wheelchair. But he lived with constant pain all his life. Very generous man, good man. And he taught me so much respect from that, from watching him. He didn't complain. Not once did he complain. He would apologize for being embarrassed by his cussing, but other than that, he would not complain about, man, I mean, that's shit. I've never heard a negative word out of his mouth the whole, he lived to be 86 years old. Never heard a negative word out of his mouth. He was not that type of person. And total respect for him. I deal with chronic pain, but I'm just ashamed compared to him, because I complain. My wife hears it. I'm like, nah, man, I can't move that much. I want to do this. And she's like, she's a sweet woman to put up with me. But he never complained. And so when we talk about a person with emotional pain, you look at Matthew 26:41, talks about continuous prayer. And 1 Peter chapter 3, 8 through 12 talks about having a meek spirit, refrain from evil talk. When we speak, we bring things about us. Jesus talks about the tongue being the smallest muscle in the body and doing the most damage. So emotionally, we deal with issues. 2 Corinthians 7:1, live for perfect holiness. 1 Corinthians 10:13, escape temptation. And when it talks about escaping temptation, it's not to be around things that would tempt you, because the wages of sin are death, and it brings down you emotionally. Psalm 147:3, heal the brokenhearted and bindeth up their wounds. And my favorite, Psalm 23:3, he restored my soul, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. There's a song that he leadeth my soul was made out of. Church used to sing as a young man. Emotionally, there's different aspects. The reason I put the physical and emotional pain together because generally with the physical, you got the emotional. I deal with that all the time. Dealing with the physical pain and then emotionally having to deal with it and not being able to do what I could before. And that in itself is a lesson. God teaches us. I'm a better person for it, for myself, because I learned to persevere and I go to everything now with God, and I appreciate every little thing I can do. Emotionally, I have people in my family I don't want to say because I don't want to put them on the spot, but like I have people in my family take medication for bipolar. So it's a chemical imbalance, and they deal, and it, of course, it's an emotional thing, and one minute they're happy, next minute they're sad. Um, there's all forms of emotional problems come from stuff, depression, a person who has anxiety. I know people have bad anxiety. You have to look at what's the reasons for it, what's causing it. Always go to God in prayer for everything, and that's what I stress so much is going to God in prayer. We still live in the flesh, and that's something people understand. God heals, and God's capable of healing. But a lot of times you'll go to church and they'll preach that, well, God's going to heal you. Oh, you can't say that. In the physical sense, we have heaven to look forward to. We know there'll be no suffering in heaven. He will wipe the tears away. Does he take our memory away? There's been speculation by scholars, maybe he wipes the bad out of your memory. I don't believe that because it takes the bad out, you can't think of the good. Where God's stuck by you through some tough times. I don't know, and no one knows how he takes the tears away. Because you're in heaven, you know this person you love so much, you might know someone that's a friend or a family member that's not in heaven. So how can you not be sad for them? So I really don't know. It's not necessary. God tells us how to live, to help us out. He gives us a guideline. And to look forward to him, and he kind of gives us a taste of heaven. But there's more to it, and we'll see when we get there. It doesn't have to go in depth about heaven. But by being in the military, I've met a lot of people that have, well, you go to VA, everybody's got emotional, physical pain there, especially in certain branches of the military, like myself, infantry. You deal with, it just ties in together. And if you dwell on the things that you cannot do, for myself, that's the tough part is dwelling on. I used to be fitness, a lot of things. I did, even in high school. I was a senior in high school, senior high school. I was running to my aunt's house and back 3 times a week, and that's almost 9 3/4 mile, one, there and back. And I was doing that, and one of my buddies got me interested in martial arts, so I was doing different things there and training. I love the combat training. On top of all the, back in the day, we go hunting. You travel quite a distance, and I would go long distance hunt and trap. And of course, being in the military, especially being infantry, it takes that, as they say, an alpha to be in the infantry because it's all physical, and you push yourself. And not only that, I was in the infantry at an older age, so I really had to push myself, and you push the pain out of the back of your mind. Well, now I'm just at a point in my life where I can't push the pain out of the back of my mind. And so that's when the depression comes in, and you have trouble dealing with not being able to do what you can before. And the only way myself I've dealt with things like that is by going to God. Yes, I do counseling for PTSD, but that don't mean nothing. I mean, I go sit all day long, talk with someone, they mean well, but my wife helps me a lot. Tremendous, beautiful woman, helps me out so much in my family. But without God, without knowing God, the depression probably would overwhelm me. I would take my life. I've never had suicidal thoughts, not even once. That's because I have God to look forward to. Some people don't. They don't live for God or have that at the end holding or looking forward to. And that's the reason why, unfortunately, a lot of times a person will take their life in that situation, or the pain was tremendous. I went through my cancer. The pain was so bad. I've had a lot of things in my life. I've had kidney stone. It stuck one time. I didn't feel good. I've had a couple broken bones, bruised ribs. Uh, I've had a lot of things happen, but nothing compared to that. My radiation treatments, the pain I have, the radiation, chemo just made me weak, but it didn't give me pain. So I can understand that when you're sick. Hopefully, I'm blessed. My cancer is gone. Tomorrow, you never know. I may have uh, something come up because you're a higher risk of cancer when you've had it. Your body's higher risk getting cancer somewhere else in your body, different kind of cancer. So something may come up down the road. Not that I'm wanting that to happen, but you really don't know. There's no guarantee on this life. We're here for a certain amount of time. And some people, I've seen so much, it just seems to get to the end of the rope. And then what I've noticed about people with like great amount of physical pain or emotional is if they have God, their life is 10 times better. They can deal with things better. My grandfather didn't go to church, but he had a strong belief in God. We've talked a few times. He had a very strong belief in God. So that gave him the drive. He was a man of drive, strong man. And sometimes afflictions comes onto us in our lives to turn towards God. And sometimes it's because we're doing good. I mean, there's people that are doing good in ministry, and all of a sudden they have things happen to them, illness or something, and a lot of people are like, "Wow, well, that Satan's attacking that person. It's a spiritual attack, trying to stop them from doing God's work." But he can only do what God allows him to do. You know, you always answer to God. Satan answers God. Everybody answers God. So I pray that this gives you someone who's having some physical or emotional pain, some insight. Don't be ashamed to go to people for help. That's the biggest, especially in the military. That's the biggest issue. I've talked to people. A lot of guys, well, I'm a PTSD. Combat zone, you got it. Period. A lot of guys, man, it was ingrained in us to push ourselves, and it's hard to get away from that. But there's no shame, because we're flesh, we're weak. There's no shame in get that ego out of the way and say, hey, I need help. There is no shame in going to somebody for help. Talk to somebody, go to church, pray to God. Be careful, because some people will. I've known people go to church, and because of the people in the church, they get upset emotionally. And unfortunately, some people will stop going to church because of other people in church. I had a friend of mine who went to Bible college, and he was doing fantastic. And then went to this Bible college and came back, and he said for a lot of years he struggled with things because he went to the Bible college. If he hadn't been to Bible college, he wasn't struggling that much about issues with God. And he went to college and decided not to be. He was going to be a minister. Decided not to be a minister, and later on he worked in ministry now, teaching. But they said that going to that certain school hurt him. A lot of times there's people that will say things to you in God's house. Well, we're God's house, but I mean the church building, and you would think they wouldn't be mean and cruel. They're probably more mean and cruel because they shouldn't be that way. A lot of people get judgmental, get the wrong attitude, and it causes a lot of emotional problems because people are going there for help, and they're going to a church for help, and then they got someone in church causing problems for them. It's adding on to them. So you can't go to people. I'm not saying you can't go to people. Like I said, I do counseling, and I've talked to people. It's good. But you have to be cautious when you go to people, because people are people. We're all sinners. And some may seem to do good or meaning to help you and aren't very helpful at all. So the light at the end of the tunnel is always God. And that always bothers me and scares me with people. They get the physical down plus emotional, go to a dark place like some people I know and take their life. And I don't want to see that in anyone else. I don't want to deal with that. I've had too many friends do that, and loved ones. Always go to God for everything. And if your depression is because your physical and emotional is at that point in dark area, go get help in a heartbeat. I had someone dear to me go to the hospital and said, "Hey, I need help with this." Didn't know what to do. They just went to the hospital and got the help. There's no shame in that. God gives us a purpose for life. We are to live our life, and what we do affects other people around us. And everyone is special. Everyone deserves life. And anyone feeling down, they are special. They may think, man, it's not, how good am I doing? Like myself, I'm doing these videos to talk to people where I don't normally get out and talk to people. But this is my way of doing it. I just may have 5 people look at a video, but that's 5 people that's listened. Maybe they'll take something from this, and that's what I'm hoping and praying for. But I want to thank you for watching the video. I love you. God loves you. And just go to God to prayer for any physical, emotional problems, and He will give you answers. Seek Him out and find Him.